Welcome to Psychedelic Radio. I'm Christina Thomas, and I'm the president and founder of Myself Wellness. With me is Charles Patty, who is the Chief Education Officer and Brand Ambassador. Each week, we'll be pushing boundaries, breaking taboos, and shedding light on the use of psychedelic medicines. We want to share expert knowledge and firsthand accounts with those who have experienced transformative psychic shifts using psychedelic medicines. Joining us today is Anna Wakefield. Anna is the co-founder and COO of Wavepaths, a startup providing music for and as psychedelic therapy. Prior to Wavepaths, Anna has held executive positions in the public and nonprofit sectors, impact-driven capital ventures, and startups. She cares deeply about increasing access to effective mental health interventions. Previously held position as CMO of Drug Science, and is honored to continue to support the cause as an independent advisor. Her deep passion for work derives from her own journeys through trauma-informed psychotherapy and psychedelic therapies. In her free time, she enjoys yoga and Muay Thai and has spent months at fighter training in Thailand. She received her MA from Oxford University. Thanks for joining us with us today, Anna.
Thanks a lot. No, it's my pleasure.
So I guess the first big question is, what got you so passionate about this field and psychedelics in general?
Yeah, so I touched on it briefly in my little blurb there. Thank you so much for that. I don't always go into too much depth because obviously, I mean, a lot of people who work in the space, they come with a personal story.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, mine in particular was, as has already been mentioned, a journey through PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I tried everything that was available on the NHS in the UK. Had a lot of sort of concomitant symptoms of that, so that'd be depression, anxiety, anorexia throughout my teens. And nothing was really working for me until I came to trauma-informed psychotherapy, particularly EMDR. And it was through EMDR that I was sort of learned about psychedelic therapy. So obviously the work going on with MDMA in sort of war vets, for instance. But then I was lucky enough to be connected with some people who work with ayahuasca, and the way that they spoke about the process of an ayahuasca ceremony and what goes on during that, it just felt very, very similar in some ways to the process that you go through in EMDR. So sort of piqued my curiosity. That brought me to, I'm on, I guess, maybe 20 ayahuasca ceremonies. And that was really a massive turning point in my life. And yeah, I would say that it completely cured me of complex PTSD, which is a very, very intractable indication. And it generally can take decades to recover from if you recover at all. So I was very, very grateful for that. Just like many others working in the space, sort of becomes almost like a moral obligation to help increase access to these technologies, because I felt very lucky that I was able to access what is generally actually pretty inaccessible to most people. Even just awareness, let alone actually, being able to have the networks and the contacts and be able to afford it, frankly, the travel, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what brought me to what I'm doing today.
Thank you very much for your service to humanity. I have a very similar story where, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and psychedelic medicines alleviated 20 years worth of substance abuse and alcoholism that I went through trying to self-medicate all of that stuff. And in this very similar sense, after I healed through these modalities, it became my purpose to scream from the rooftops and have people have the ability to have access to these medicines, because I think that everybody out there needs to know that there is an option and people don't have to suffer anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I did get to see a little bit about Wavepaths, and I think it's a pretty cool platform. And I really like how, you can kind of adjust the music to bring people deeper. So can you talk to us a little bit about Wavepaths?
Yeah, so we're founded in psychedelic therapy, but as the intro mentioned, we create music both for and as psychedelic therapy. So my co-founder is a neuroscientist by training. He worked on some of the sort of seminal clinical trials and sort of reigniting Western interest in research in psychedelic medicine. So it was at his during his PhD at Imperial, where he was looking at psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. And during his work there, they were using music. So music was one of those things that everybody kind of knew it was important and that always should be present. But no one was really like paying much attention in that direction. And like there was this light bulb moment for him when he suddenly realized that, the most consistent presence within these experiences, beyond like, so the music was as important a presence in the experience as the therapist, as the patient, as like the setting and then the room. So why aren't we looking into this? And so he sort of started researching a little bit into what might be going on with the music. And during his really interesting paper here is called The Hidden Therapist. During a particular trial, he found out that it was actually the subjective experience of the music, more so than anything that was going on with the drug in particular, that was more predictive of positive therapy outcomes. So that was like pretty remarkable as a finding. In terms of modern Western medicine, we're sort of very pharma driven. You go, you take a pill, that's what makes you better. But it wasn't just like the music that was more predictive of positive therapy outcomes. It was actually the subjective experience of the music. So this is really, really curious, and this sort of was the foundational insight behind Wavepaths. So, if this is truly the case, how and why, what's going on here? Like, what are the variables that we can control for in the music that can optimize for positive therapy outcomes versus the opposite? Because, these are very, very powerful substances, like very, very open, vulnerable states. And as, transformatively positive as these states can end up being, there is also a downside too if you're not careful, if they're not managed intelligently and with intention. And so, we sort of, in the early stages, dedicated the company's mission to sort of figuring out, like, okay, so proving out what's actually happening here, and then developing products that help this process, so help practitioners optimize the process for their patients. So the essential element that we boiled down, like the core that was predicting outcomes, was this idea of resonance, which is like very kind of nebulous as a term. But we brought it down to one level deeper, to this idea of it needs to essentially resonate with what we call state and trait variables of the individual. So a state variable might be, your emotional state in the moment, like how you're showing up on the day, like what sort of musical experience do you need right now? Do you need to be soothed? Are you like, is your ego strength in a place where you can really do some deep exploration, some deep work? Whereas a trait variable is more sort of more fixed. What are your musical preferences? What's the cultural context you grew up in? What music will resonate more with you in that context? And so the system that we've developed essentially personalizes in a very, very intimate fashion the music that you listen to for your experience. So it optimizes for resonance with you.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so the therapist kind of controls that, right? Or whoever you are working with really works with you, correct? To set the tone and set the I guess the depth of where you're going to go in your experience.
Yeah, so it really depends on the context. So depending on the setting, the clinical setting, there may be more or less ability to actually personalize and adapt to the individual. However, like our recommendation, like the ideal way of conducting psychedelic assisted psychotherapy would be that actually the therapist works hand in hand with the patient themselves to personalize, because, for the best will in the world, you're personalizing with someone else, you need to involve them in that process. And actually we found that involving the patient in that process is in itself a therapeutic experience. A lot of the way that we approach a lot of Western medicine, quite frankly, but the way we approach mental health in particular can be quite disempowering. And to give that sense of agency back to the patient in designing an experience for themselves with the support of a therapist is quite a disruptive way of doing things. I mean, psychotherapy is moving a lot more in that direction these days, as person-centered therapy, for instance. But that we find that to be a very very important part of the process is kind of co-creation of the experience.
Very nice. Yeah, I love the fact of empowering the person that's receiving the medicine to really, take charge of their own healing journey. That's what we really promote from our facility as well. I don't know if it's proprietary information, but are you tuning things to a certain frequency? I know there's different healing frequencies out there that music can be played at. Is that something that's incorporated into this?
So there is research going in that direction, frequencies, binaural beats, and so on. Where we focus there as a company is where we see the most credible depth of research, and where we're sort of also focusing our own proprietary research, which is around optimizing for resonance, as I mentioned. So beyond like binaural beats or frequencies, actually does this music resonate with you? Like, is it attuned to you in the moment? That's like the most important thing that we found in predicting positive therapy outcomes.
Okay.
And what kind of outcomes are you seeing, or do you have any stories that you can share of just, something very profound that happened through, incorporating your music with the therapy?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great I guess honors of working in the space is that you do get exposed to some really, really moving stories. And so, I mean, we're a B2B startup, and so we primarily service practitioners working with patients. And we have like a channel whereby after every single session run on our platform, feedback is shared with us. Sometimes that's from the therapist, but sometimes they do like verbatim quote patient testimonials. And yeah, I mean, obviously they are confidential completely, and so but we have in the next hopefully month or so some case studies coming out from some patients in a particular clinic we've been working with who very, very generously agreed to share their stories. So at that point, I'm hoping that the world will start to see a bit more intimately what's possible with music.
So I guess the question for you that I have is, it's very interesting, and maybe I'm wrong, so please correct me if I am. It says that this music is used for or as psychedelic therapy. Can you explain how the music might be actually used as psychedelic therapy?
Yeah, so I guess one of the insights, like going back to the primary insight, if it really is the subjective experience of the music that's more predictive of positive therapy outcomes than the drug, and any of the drug variables that are being controlled for, then could music actually in itself be a therapeutic and a psychedelic essentially? And like honestly, that intuition is not new. People have been working with music therapeutically. I mean, probably since human beings existed. Like it's a part of what we've developed to help, work with our emotional worlds, for instance, understand ourselves, understand our interaction with others. And so in some ways, it's not new at all what we're saying here, like music as psychedelic therapy, in the sense of like soul revealing, like using it as a tool to explore your inner world. And so what we've developed is we've actually just about to launch a consumer application, which honestly is where we were supposed to start as a company, but with COVID and everything, we pivoted to B2B, to like remote therapy, for various different reasons. But yes, so we truly believe that music can be used as a psychedelic in and of itself. And in a world where sadly, I mean, I know you guys are very familiar with this, like it's realistically, these substances are not very accessible still. We're sort of very, very hopeful that maybe MDMA might be available by 2023. This has been phase 3 trials, but like these things take a long time. And what if we could actually start working with music as a proxy for these states? The music is completely accessible for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And so that's what we started to do. And we actually have therapists, like psychotherapists, working with our system in exactly the same way as they would if they were working with a substance, but just without psychedelic assistance. So, it's the same process with preparation with their client, designing the session, having the same arc of a session as you might have, maybe if it's a ketamine session, maybe about 16 minutes long or longer, depending on the route of administration. But, you have an onset and you have a slow peak and then a return, and you just go on this journey that takes you deeper and deeper inside of yourself. And then you integrate that process afterwards. So we have non-drug therapists essentially working in that way with our system. But you can also do that at home yourself, just as a listener, anyone. And that's what we're launching at the moment, this consumer application essentially. So it allows you to create a personalized therapeutic experience for yourself that's personalized and adapted to you and your needs and your preferences. And you can then work with this as a tool to explore these altered states of consciousness in the comfort of your own home.
Nice.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Can't wait to check it out when it comes out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
for sure. We I don't know if we do psychedelic ketamine therapy at our facility, and I think it's definitely something that we would be interested in looking into, just because, anything that we can do to help people on their healing journeys and get, more success with, really getting people there.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd love to follow up with you on that, of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Give you a demo of our practitioner platform.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
I noticed the accent. Where are you from? Or maybe it's not. I know it's not an accent for you, but for us, it's...
I'm from London. I'm a Londoner, born and bred. Yeah.
Nice. I actually lived in North London, right across from Arsenal Stadium, outside the Holloway Road Tube Station, for over about 6 months years ago.
No way. That's literally next door neighbors to me. I live in Finsbury Park.
Nice.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So is there any specific, like, I know that, so the music works for, the healing even on itself, but do you think that there's a specific psychedelic compound out there that might pair with the music that you are creating better than other compounds? Or do you think it's just one of these things that's going to work with all the different modalities?
So we actually, we're sort of founded in sort of psilocybin work. That's where my co-founder started his research. We've optimized for ketamine primarily first, just because that's what's currently most widely available.
Yeah.
But we, the musical challenge for different substances does look different, absolutely. And the musical challenge for MDMA versus psilocybin versus ketamine, the solution does look very different. Practically speaking, just, a psilocybin journey to create a musical experience which is novel and fresh and narrative and engaging and just like beautiful, aesthetically, like blows your mind throughout the course of 8 hours, is a much greater challenge than, like maybe a 60-minute experience. So we are optimizing for different substances. We are very, very well suited for ketamine today. We're also working with ibogaine. We're creating music for ibogaine at the moment. But we have a research team in-house who are constantly validating the musical decisions and design decisions that we make in sort of the aesthetic decisions against different substances to validate therapy outcomes for different substances.
Very nice.
Yeah, I think, I was just reading something and it said that because you mentioned ibogaine, and we actually just talked to Beyond the other day. And so
great.
they're working with
ibogaine.
Yeah.
Maybe we could connect.
No, they're working with Wavepaths.
Oh, are you guys? Oh, okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, no, we love Beyond. They're fantastic. We love the way they're thinking about like creating a container around the experience. And particularly with ibogaine and working with addiction, like these are very, very long recovery horizons. There's lots of different, it's about creating a long-term environment to help encourage like embedded behaviors, and it's a much more challenging problem and requires much more considered thought and careful and intentional like dedicated effort. And so what we're really excited about working with Beyond is that it's not just creating music for the ibogaine experience itself, but also how can music support the journey of preparation and integration in like as each client goes back into their day-to-day lives, which is really where the struggle comes back. like working with music, with deep listening, which is the way that we work with music, but also using music to support like breath work and body work, and all these other different modalities that you wrap around these protocols, these longer term protocols, to really support people long term, who are struggling with like really, really struggling and need that level of attention, like personalized attention long term. So that's what we're really excited about.
Are you seeing that people are able to go back to the feelings that they had during their experiences? Like, are they able to listen to the music that you provided for them?
That was my question. I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what's sort of like magic about our music compared to, say, alternatives like you working with Spotify or recorded tracks or whatever, is that our music is generated live in the moment in the browser for each individual. So it's completely unique and new. That being said, every single experience is then recorded and saved and then can be revisited by the client for integration purposes. So we find that to be a really helpful tool within the integration process of like triggering, like, remembering what came up for you and the autobiographical insights, like how you're feeling, what you're thinking. And you can continue to work with that throughout the course of your recovery.
Very nice. Yeah, we have a friend who's Dr. Michelle Weiner, and she's actually doing psychedelic ketamine therapy on the East Coast of Florida. And when we were speaking to her, she's a big believer that when you're listening to a song or music during an actual psychedelic treatment, that moving forward, like the feelings that you're feeling during that treatment while you're listening to that music, you can actually revisit that same musical piece in the future. If, let's say, if you went into a depression or if you were feeling anxiety, and if you listen to it, it can actually bring you back to where that psychedelic state that you were at when you first heard the music was. Is that something that you are finding in your research, or if you've heard any kind of testimonials from people that have actually used your services?
Well, yeah, I mean, just sort of anecdotally, like the integration, we call it the integration feature in our platform is very, very, very popular. So, the therapists more often than not do share the recording with their clients to help support integration. So, I mean, we haven't done any specifically research on that yet, but we are finding anecdotally, at least through our practitioner community, that this is working really well.
Very interesting.
I kind of had one of those experiences before myself. It was on a lower dose of ketamine, and there's this one song, and it always plays in our facility. And every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, the angel song, and I'm just back there in this like really floating world. So I believe
it. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a bit like a smell, I guess. Songs like whether it's riffs or full songs or like the little like vocal motifs, just like a smell, they have the power to really bring you back to a certain experiential memory. And that's really what you're working with music and with psychedelics. You're working within like the experiential learning system versus like the sort of more prefrontal cortex, like rational, like linguistic, like this is like the way things should be. I'm gonna, this is my basically the ego state. And so if you want to work to release some of that more like deeper set experiential learnings that may be like more negative, I guess that's essentially how trauma lodges in your psyche, then working with music and returning to that can really help embed experiential learnings in the longer term.
Nice. Have you ever thought about doing a study on like, they have these it's like, it's not a helmet, but it's these things they hook up and it tracks brain activity. And have you ever, or I don't know if you guys have like taken somebody that's going through an experience without the music but on the medicine and attaching them to that, and then actually doing it while they're under the medicine while listening to your music, and if you've noticed any kind of different brain activity that's going on? Or
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the next step for our system, which is what we're working on at the moment, is, if we're personalizing and adapting the music to an individual. At the moment, these are sort of subjective user inputs that we're working with. But the next step is biofeedback. And we are absolutely working with a couple of research institutions and trials looking at working with EEG headsets, I think you might be referring to. Yeah. But there are other things you can use, like heart rate variability. You can use sort of like galvanic skin response. So like lots of different inputs you can use to help adapt the music to the individual depending on their sort of physiological state. So yeah, that is where we're going. It's like quite a new field of research, but we're very, very excited about it.
Amazing. I love it.
So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
So you can, if you're a listener who's interested in this idea of like music as psychedelic therapy, you can actually already sign up to our listener community on our website, which is www.wavepaths.com. And if you go to resources, you'll find a deep listening community there. And you can already access personalized on-demand deep listening experiences for yourself. You can access a couple a month at the moment for a monthly subscription, but we're about a month away from launching our app, which will mean you can access unlimited on-demand deep listening experiences that are personalized to you and your needs. If you're a practitioner, then again, it's the same website, but you just go to Wavepaths for practitioners and you can book a demo with our sales team. And we'll show you the platform. You can walk through how to personalize and adapt your music, walk through a case study, maybe of a client you're working with currently, and how you might work with our system to support their needs best. And sort of general inquiries, it's just wave@wavepaths.com.
All right. If you had one major message that you wanted to give to our listeners or get out into the universe, what would it be?
I guess like I have a huge amount of excitement with this idea of working with music as a psychedelic. We're all everyone's sort of deep in this space, as we all are, and I'm sure many of our listeners are. We're sort of like constantly pushing up against this frustration around like regulation and when these things are going to be accessible, and also some fears and some risks around like working with these substances responsibly. And actually, music can be a very much more accessible, lower risk, although it can still be very, very powerful way of like building your knowledge and expertise of working with these states, essentially, like working with altered states, not necessarily with the substance. But it's great preparation if you're a psychotherapist wanting to become a psychedelic therapist. You can work with music as a psychedelic first, as you're training to become a psychedelic therapist, or if you're just someone like you or I, who's really interested in psychedelic therapy but can't necessarily access it today. You can start preparing for your experience. You can work with music, and you can actually achieve some really transformative experiences just with the music alone.
Amazing.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for today, but I want to say thank you for journeying with us.
Thank you.
And I want to also say thank you to all of our listeners for joining in on this edition of Psychedelic Radio. You can download past episodes of our program by going to cannabisradio.com or by subscribing to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. To learn more about Wavepaths and Anna's company, please visit www.wavepaths.com today. And to learn more about psychedelic therapy, please visit our website at myselfwellness.center. Thanks for journeying with us. And if nobody's told you that they love you lately, we do.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.